Hi scholars, today we're going to be working on the laws of the First General Assembly, which was instituted in 1619 with the House of Burgesses. So if you recall, the last few days we've been talking about the organization, how this was set up, as well as the roles and responsibilities of those people who were involved in the House of Burgesses. Well, one of those things is that they have to create and eventually enact these laws that they discussed. And so today that's what we're going to be looking at is some historical documents. So these are actual laws from 1619, and I think you're going to get a chuckle out of some of them in regards to what they thought were issues that they really needed to address. So today your directions are going to be to read the following laws of 1619, and then you are going to select 3 of those laws, that's your choice, to annotate using notice and note signpost strategies. And then you're going to research some of these laws. You have some links there that you can use for that, and then also you need to fill out a note guide. Okay, so let's take a look at what I'm looking at exactly. So right here are your highlighting for your notice and note signposts. Just as a reminder, you need to use this chart and use this key to help you. When you're using contrast and contradictions, you're going to use yellow. When there's extreme language, you're going to use the green. Numbers or stats, a pink or red is fine. Quoted words that are directly coming from a source and a person of authority should be orange, and word gaps are blue. So let's take a look at my example here for you. The first law is about marriage. And so this is the actual law, how it was written in 1619. And keep in mind, guys, this is Old English. So this is going to be a little difficult because this is how they spoke and wrote. And so just take your time and work your way through it. So the law states, no maid or woman servant, either now resident in the colony or hereafter to come, shall contract herself in marriage without either the consent of her parents or her master or masters, or the magistrate or minister of the place both together. And whatsoever minister shall marry or contract any such persons without some of the aforesaid consents shall be subject to severe censure of the governor and the council of estate. Well, first of all, that's a mouthful. That's not how we talk today. So we really definitely need to use those annotation strategies and break this down. So let's start by looking at the first sentence. So no maid or woman servant, either now resident in the colony or hereafter to come, shall contract herself in marriage. Well, let's stop right there. First of all, we're talking about a woman, and it says no maid or no servant. So that could be any kind of person. That could be somebody who is an indentured servant, it could be an enslaved person, or it could simply just be a woman. And then the next part of the sentence is explaining that either now is a resident in the colony or here to come. So that's for right now, 1619 is what they're talking about, but they're also planning ahead in the future. So anybody who may move into the colony after 1619. So shall contract herself in marriage. Well, that's something I need to take a look at. So I know what contract means as a noun, but as a verb, I'm struggling with that. So that's a term that I'm going to have to look up. So I'm going to highlight that in blue, so it's a word gap. And then without either the consent of her parents or her master or masters or the magistrate and the minister of the both places together. Well, to me, this is a contrast and a contradiction because I didn't think that all women had masters or masters. So that's something that I need to look into a little bit more closely. Moving on within the law, and whatsoever minister shall marry or contract, again, that word came up. That's a word I need to look up. So there's a word gap. I'm going to highlight that in blue. Any such persons without some of the aforesaid consent shall be subject to the severe censure. Well, severe is definitely an exaggeration, right? That's something that we need to highlight in green because it's absolute language, and it's exaggeration. And then censure, that's a new word for me as well. So I need to look that word up. And then now what I need to do is, now that I have my annotations and take some time to look up those words, I need to translate this into modern day language. So what does this really say in how we speak? So instead of using 1619 vernacular, how they spoke back then, we're going to change this to make sense to how we speak today. So literally take line by line. This is going to take some time and it might be a little challenging for you, but if you use those annotations, you should be able to work your way through it. So no maid or woman servant. So let's look at that. I'm going to put down for mine, no woman, freed or otherwise, either now resident in the colony or hereafter to come. Well, basically, I think that means living in Virginia colony currently, or maybe later move to the colony. Okay, shall contract herself in marriage. So I looked up contract, and it means to engage or agree to marry somebody. So without the consent of her parents, and I'm getting that from the yellow portion, without either consent of her parents or her master or masters. So basically, when we put that in our how we speak today, shall engage in or agree to marry without the consent of her parents or her owners or a judge who's a magistrate and the church minister. So then later on it goes on to saying that that the person is going to receive severe censure. They're subject to severe censure. So, and if any church minister then marries a woman who does not have that permission of the people mentioned above, will be fined heavily by the governor. So I'm breaking this down. Obviously, it's taking me a little bit of time. I did this on paper first. It's however you feel most comfortable with it. So you're going to select 3 laws and do the exact same thing that I just did. You're first going to stop, read it for understanding, just become familiar with some terms. Read it through the second time, this time making sure that you're using those annotation strategies for notice and note. And the third time I would read through it just to help you translate it. And once you do that, I do that on a piece of paper, and then you can simply copy and paste that information into your chart below. So you're going to pick 3 laws, and then we're going to take that a step further. So after you've selected that law, you need to answer a couple questions. So first of all, what's the context of that law? So basically, what reasons are behind the existence of each law? What could have happened in colonial Virginia that caused this law to be written? So this is really thinking about 1619 social structures and what was happening in the colony and what was accepted as a norm. So this is a little bit predictive. You might not know this, but you can probably draw some conclusions on your own and make some inferences from the type of law. The second piece of your notes that you need to take is then that summary or that translation. So this is hard again. So take your time and read and reread and annotate. Okay? And the last piece is something that you're gonna have to do a little outside research possibly for, and that's something called a legacy. So how do these laws, these concepts develop over time, and what is the lasting effect? So for example, do we have laws like that today? Do we have anything similar? Yes or no? And it might stem from some of these laws that we have from 1619. So there's some links up here that will help you, that you can look at. That'll give you some more information about that. And you can also type your answers in these boxes. Okay? So going back to that marriage example that we looked at together, some context. So what are some reasons behind this law that they had to write about women marrying? So I'm just making some inferences here, and women must have been marrying without the consent of their parents or their masters. So we learned about indentured servants as well as enslaved peoples, and we know that they are considered property to their masters for the time being. And so these individuals must have been marrying without the consent of those individuals. So when we take that a step further and think about it, obviously we have been learning about the class systems in colonial Virginia. So this could have greatly affected if people are marrying outside of their class. So obviously they must have been thinking that this is important enough that they make a law to keep people in their classes. Our summary we've already have done, so I literally just copied and pasted and put that in here. So you can do the same thing. And then the third thing is the legacy. So how do these concepts develop over time, and what's the lasting effect? So we want to think about, do we have laws like that in place today? And so women eventually do not need to have legal permission to marry from their parents. However, today in most states, you still have to be at least 18 to marry without the consent of your parents. So that's something I was able to look up easily. You might have to do something like that as well. Something else that's interesting is this idea of asking for a hand in marriage. That really stems from this law. So if you've ever heard of someone seeking permission from their parents to ask for the hand in marriage, part of that is stemming from this law from 1619. Okay, so as you can see, here are the signpost key once more. These are all the different laws. You'll see a line underneath of it that lets you know that that's a different law. So you have your choice between idleness, gambling, something to do with the colonial economy, Virginia Native Americans, theft in the colonies, church in the colonies, and indentured servitude. So pick 3 of those and complete the exact process that I just modeled for you. If you have any questions, you know that you can reach out via email, and I always have Zooms for help sessions on Mondays at 11:45. Also, I encourage you to reach out to peers and have conversations and get help if you need there as well.